As founders, we face many challenging moments, and occasionally those moments force us to reconsider everything. For Marc Stöckli, that moment happened on the day the world stopped.
At this early stage, we believe that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center in New York.
I had a board meeting on 9/11 where at some point we actually stopped and went to watch TV. But that was a very crucial board meeting for me, and that started my fascination for boards. That's where I really started to think, okay, boards can be super strong.
Being an entrepreneur means dealing with chaos and uncertainty. But as the founder, those moments often hit harder than when simply employed.
It was really difficult to learn how to deal with this increased volatility. What I call it, the highs are higher and the lows are a lot lower as an entrepreneur.
Before the ultimate exit of his company, Marc entertained several offers. One reached the very end of the negotiation phase, and then something unbelievable happened.
And then, radio silence. The person didn't know, there was no response anymore. And we really had no clue what's happening. And with quite a few weeks actually, time delay, we learned that he was arrested by the FBI. It's a federal investigation, and indicted and charged with wire fraud and multiple fraud cases.
And when facing into the void, there is really only one thing that will keep a group together.
This could have risked the company. So trust is something, I would say trust, I treat it like a bank account.
In this episode, Marc shares deeply about the journey of voluntary leadership inside Entrepreneurs Organization, which is where we are good friends from, the lessons, the scars, and then the structures that make boards not just functional, but transformational. Enjoy this episode. Marc Stöckli, my friend, welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Look forward. Hello, Josh.
So great to have you here. All the way from Switzerland today, I think?
Yes, correct. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Zug, Switzerland.
Excellent. Hey, so one of the things our researchers dug up is that you documented 200 odd board meetings over a duration of 20 years. Now, was the intention to ultimately write a book, or were you thinking a reality show, or along the way did you think that maybe this could make a better sitcom?
Really none of the above, because it really is started more kind of evolutionary than, with a grand plan in place with my first board meeting at whatever age 30, plus, planning that whatever 25 years later I would write a book or produce a sitcom or a drama or whatever. And sometimes, it's all of the above. The board meeting can often use all of the above. But really the starting point, and, Michael might not get into it, was really happened on a very famous or rather infamous day, labeled as 9/11. I had a board meeting on 9/11 where at some point we actually stopped and went to watch TV. But that was a very crucial board meeting for me, and that started my fascination for boards. That's where I really started to think, okay, boards can be super strong, but boards cannot also completely fail. Kind of what does it take? That thought has stayed with me for many years, and I started to take very diligent notes in board meetings. And last year I sat down and tried to write it all down.
Yeah, wow. So we've got the board minutes, which is what happens from a conversation, decision, actions that need to be taken, obviously. But were you kind of observing the behavior and what people were, how their comportment was? Was that kind of the orientation of your notes?
It's mainly, so I take notes in every meeting, and I actually take notes the old-fashioned way with a fountain pen and paper.
Wow.
And the reason is I think I internalize much more when I write. And I think that the main process is that I synthesize already, because I don't take kind of verbatim notes. I take kind of the synthesis. So it's already a thought process going on. And that helps me memorize or kind of really conclude and learn. So that's the main point. I don't consult my notes all that often. I'm very aware that electronic notes are much better to consult because you can search and all that. But anyway, so the last 8 years, I've started taking notes in board meetings, not just at the meeting level, but also at the meta level of what's happening in the boardroom. And that, as you kind of framed, is exactly more kind of the functionality, the behavior, the dysfunctions possibly, the dynamics of the boardroom. So also I started to observe, okay, why does a discussion go well? Why does a discussion not go well? So that kind of changed the last 8 years very astutely and very intentionally. I took notes also on kind of what does it take for a board meeting to get good or not good.
Yeah. We're going to definitely delve into that subject as we get to the middle-ish of our conversation, but this is a show about entrepreneurship at its core. But I know that you started a business not long before that infamous board meeting on 9/11. So it was in the year 2000 that you started Totemo, and you started a cybersecurity company, but your background before that was in high-end management consulting. So at that stage, cybersecurity was important, but it wasn't on everyone's lips and on everyone's minds. So what did you see that others didn't see at that stage?
Yeah, very, very true. My career before becoming an entrepreneur was professional services. I worked in investment banking, corporate finance, and strategy consulting with BCG. Jet set life all over the world. And then I really kind of said, okay, enough slide writing, enough PowerPoint. Let's roll up the sleeves and see if I can really do something, right? Not just advise and consult, but really do something. And our first company was in cybersecurity, but Totemo was a restart of at least semi-failed, if not failed company, which was much broader than cybersecurity. It was kind of an incredibly powerful but way too broad platform for information management, input, output, document management, and the whole thing. And there, our founding team fell apart. And that's where that board played a crucial role. And kind of Totemo is like phoenix from the ashes, was a restart out of that with part of the team, with one of the co-founders, and a part of the team, and with one very, very specific core idea that was part of his much grander, super aspirational vision, but very specific, the notion of secure email. So the founding thought that I had on Totemo was really the notion to how do we protect the confidentiality of emails when they're being transmitted. So a really privacy theme, which probably being Swiss is not too far-fetched, right? We were a bit ahead of the time. So the first years were tough because we were somewhat ahead of the market. But then again, especially as a young company, you need to be somewhat ahead. It's hard to join late if big ones are in there already. So we had a few very tough years, but then 2005-ish, we started to win our first large customers, and that's where it started to kind of take off and do there.
Yeah, got it. So let's just go back a step. So you mentioned that Totemo was born of another business, and that business didn't go well because the co-founding relationship fell apart. I have a dialogue with founding teams when I work with two or more founders in a group. I say to them, look, this relationship that you have in this room should be as important as your significant other relationship at home, right? Your marriage.
Yes.
And my observation for people has been, if your business partnership is not going well, your marriage is going well, things are okay. If they're both going badly, life is hell, right? It is a terrible, terrible place to be.
Yes.
You're relatively young, but what happened? Was it a conflict in terms of personalities or values, or was it divergent interests and lacking alignment? What was the problem that you had?
It was both a strategy theme as well as a culture theme at the same time, which is probably, if you align on neither, it's probably their sentence. So we were 4 founders, 2 of which were quite senior, quite established in life. They had some success, they had some wealth already, and 2 more junior founders, one being myself and the other being the CTO. Who I only met, the 2 senior guys I knew for a long time. And I had raised some funds from a personal relationship from one of Switzerland's most iconic industrial families. And basically on strategy, Volker, the more junior guy, and I wanted to have a more narrow strategy, not as broad. And that's one difference. And the other one was when things started to, go relatively rocky, the 2 senior guys were really kind of, we don't care. We have the money. We just go as long as it takes. We just burn through the money. We try everything. And that didn't feel right to me because the signs were on the wall that, with the boss strategy, it just would not work. We tried to solve too many problems at the same time for a young, small company. And that's where really that board meeting came in, where we managed to actually turn around. And in our case, it was a decision to orderly wind down the company. So having no debt outstanding, being able to pay back quite a large part of the investment back to the investor, which was not a legal obligation because it's equity, but was very important to me.
Hi, it's Josh. Thanks for listening to the show. When founders talk about the dream exit, they're really talking about freedom. Freedom to choose how to use their time and to decide what comes next. As a client of JB Were in New Zealand, I know this is what sets them apart. They help entrepreneurs and leaders turn success into significance. A great exit isn't just about the commas in your bank account. It's about what those commas allow you to create. Two Commas is proudly partnered with JB Were, helping founders by putting their wealth to work for generations. Well, what do you think? I was having a conversation with someone recently and they're looking to get into their third, maybe fourth venture. And the situation is that they are financially independent, quite wealthy, and they're looking at bringing in a couple of younger, far less experienced, nowhere near the resources kind of people. And I have hesitation, I have pause for concern when you've got markedly different financial situations and power, essentially, of founders. What's your view on that?
I have one company I'm aware of where I'm also engaged and also chairing their board where this worked very well. The age difference was not different. There was no age difference, but one person had an exit, so was able to fund the first few years of the company. And there it works perfectly. They're an incredibly strong and aligned founder team. But I agree with you. I think that's a very tough position to solve because basically what you need to solve almost upfront is the equity part where one person kind of funds the thing at least for a certain while and the other puts in sweat. But how exactly and what contributions is hard to assess upfront. And the chance that one party feels like unfair doing more than the other is very significant, which will be very difficult to overcome.
Yeah. And that feeling of inequity, unfairness will quite quickly lead to resentment, right?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And that's corrosive to a relationship. So I get it.
Absolutely.
Totemo, you had the 9/11 moment. You were building wide, then realized you had to narrow down the focus. Took you about 5 years to kind of get really hit product market fit. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
In a way, I mean, today you would turn it that way, but as I said, I think it's a bit more maybe mundanely. I think we were just a little bit ahead of the market. The awareness was there that email was inherently insecure, but the readiness to pay was, I mean, not there, but just not very broadly, right? And we were, for example, right on banking. We thought banking, private wealth management in particular would be a good starting point. And again, given the Swiss location, that's also an industry that is quite logical to target. That one worked relatively soon. Law firms, I was wrong. Law firms, it took them a while longer. And I realized law firms are still quite old-fashioned. They're thinking at that time, most of the senior partners in the law firms you targeted were, yes, using email, but the way they used email was basically dictate the email to their personal assistants, right? And then it was sent from them on their behalf. So, of course, they were not interested to spend some money on secure email because their part dictating the email and getting the printout on paper, that seemed pretty safe.
It's a wry chuckle that I had about law firms there because I'm watching, as no doubt you are, the advent of AI, generative AI, agentic AI, the incredible power of it, its ability to recall, reference other material, write documents. And you're like, well, one of the logical places that you and I both know is the law profession. And the lawyers that I know are like, oh, no, we're good. Like the last few years have been great. Like since COVID, it's been, happy days and plenty of business. And right now there's plenty of liquidations going on. And so they're kind of sticking their head in the sands. And there's a company that I'm looking to engage me with the notion of building an AI practice as an offshoot to their very successful legal practice with the notion of let's disrupt ourselves but in case someone else does, because it's going to happen, right? And so, you're talking about partners dictating emails, 15, 20 years ago, and we're talking now about them kind of ignoring, the email on the sand. Not that they don't do that; it's a myth, but the risk of this thing just kind of passing them by.
Well, I'm close to quite a few legal tech companies, and one just had a large exit. I think the law firms have become much more aware, and many are really engaging and leveraging AI tools. Again, not replacing lawyers, but clearly leveraging and automating some workflows and some pre-work. I think it's. I think they seem more aware now than what I felt 25 years ago on our topic of secure email.
Yeah. So for you as a business, you worked across a range of different sectors. Ultimately, the company was very, very successful, and you had an exit kind of 2021, I think was the ultimate date.
End of December, right before Christmas 21. So it's nice, always a nice Christmas present, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what were some of the critical moments that you had in terms of those inflection points as you were building the business and, kind of scaling from your home base to internationally and growing teams and product and that sort of thing?
I think one was the restart for sure, right? Two of our original founders continued, and we brought in a third co-founder at the same time. So the Totemo had 3 co-founders. Then relatively soon, Volker, the CTO, left because at that stage he couldn't deal with the financial uncertainty we had as a very wobbly startup with very insecure finances and salary payments being, well, we're not sure we can pay salaries. So he had to leave. So that was, many thought that would be insurmountable because he seemed to be the technical brain, but we had a very strong tech team, and 2 of them really stepped up, seriously stepped up and really took over. Then my own exit was a difficult period because it led to a founder strife. Exits are often difficult, and we managed to overcome that as well. Actually, towards the exit, we completely worked together again, and I was entrusted with a key part in negotiation because I had more transaction experience than the people my friends and co-founders who led the business at the time. And then I think really the phase I mentioned, 05, 06, when we really started to crack the market, when we went from really shaky and having to do external work and consulting work to keep the heads above water, where we started to really get into our core business of being able to sell our product.
Yeah, right. Great. So I've missed something there. So did you exit the operations of the company before the company was sold at some time?
Yes. Yeah. Quite a lot earlier. Yes. I handed over the CEO role to Daria, to the co-founder, in 2006. So a lot earlier, and stepped out operationally.
What did you do for the next 15 years until we met?
Well, that's where I really got into much more into board work, but not board work per se. But I started doing being very active as what we call an angel investor, right? An early stage technology investor, and became very active with some of these companies. Yes, not in an operational role, but very active. One of them is Beekeeper, where I was the first investor. We just did a large merger in July this year, where I chaired the board, which, it goes up and down in phases, but in certain phases, sometimes in crisis modes, sometimes in real opportunity expansion modes, I would engage very, very actively. And if you have a set of 4 or 5 such roles, it makes for quite a busy day. So I don't have an operational role, but I definitely am not retired either.
Yeah, got it. So 5 years into the business in Totemo, you decided that to exit. What was the key driver behind that?
The key driver was really at that stage, as I said, we had started to really have good clients. 2004 was the first large private bank that signed with the first really large kind of volume contracts. And we started to win larger clients. And it seemed that our strategy was quite set. The product, as I said, the product market fit was set, the product was given, we had a product expansion plan. We had a kind of a distribution plan in mind, also expansion in other markets geographically, segments. So the roadmap seemed very clear. And it was all about execution. Execution, in our case, primarily meant software sales, both direct sales as well as partner sales. And I'm not the world's best software salesperson. And it's also not what gives me the most energy. And Dario is an amazing salesperson. So it just felt not as enriching and not as much learning for me, or at least not in the fields that really give me much energy, where I think my ikigai kind of circles converge. So that was the main reason to exit, to step out.
Yeah, got it. We've talked about angel investing before because that's something that we both share as an interest in similar durations. Actually, it was 2004, I think, that I made my first angel investment. And certainly back in those days, I didn't know that was a terminology that existed, angel investing. It was just giving some friends some money because they were starting a business. In fact, it was 2001. I wrote about this recently.
Oh, that's early. That's early, yes. Yeah.
It was very, very early. A funny side story, and I don't think I've told this on this podcast before, is that I made the first investment and then there was another 3 or 4 in the next 5 or so years. So it was small, small amounts and sporadic with no real plan around it. And I decided when that first business had a really great exit, 22x exit, so it was a decent return from my first startup. So, of course, my ego, and we're going to talk about ego later on, went, we're all good at this, Josh, so you should, keep going and doubling down and, kind of make something out of it. I had sufficient money to put that into the family office and then go, I should learn a bit more about this. And so I met a icon of angel investing, Bill Payne, rest in peace, Bill, he's passed now. And he told me the rule of 10. Which is what you'll know. 3 will go, you'll lose all your money. 3 will end up with about equal back, and then the next 3 will do 1 or 2 times. So you've got the 9 are back at 0 again, and then 1 will go 15 to 20, maybe 50, maybe 100 times. And so that's how you make money out of the portfolio. So I said to him, so Bill, my story is that the very first company that I invested in, I had a 22x. What should I do? And he goes, get out now. I didn't. I stuck around. I couldn't help myself.
Yeah. So one out of 1 is a nice strike ratio.
Right. It took me till 33 to get the really big one, the 200x. You focus on those wonderful success stories. They can happen, but it takes you a long time to get there, and you have no assurance of even getting there, even with that volume of investments made. But back in those really early days for you, was it a burgeoning kind of space in Switzerland, or was there some maturity already around the investing? Because in the States, by then, it was already very mature. So
yes, clearly, Europe is not the US and less kind of the Valley. And I think what has changed the most now, there was technology. We always had a great university system, great education system. So that part of the equation clearly has been in place all along. I think what has markedly changed about the last 10 plus years is mainly our attitude to risk from 2 sides, and obviously they play into each other. I think it's much more okay to start early as an entrepreneur these days. And if something doesn't work, the road is not blocked. You can still go back to a corporate career. You can still go back to, if you're a grad of a top school, you can still go to work at BCG or McKinsey or Goldman. It's much more forgiving place. And that kind of the flip side of that is that some of the top graduates, some of the smartest people coming from top universities actually dare to take that step and start right away from their PhDs or whatever. Beekeepers, case in point, the founders were ETH, so the Polytechnic University of Zurich graduates, PhD students that actually started the venture while they were doing their PhD, the end of their studies. So they dare to do that. And I think that is much more common. We got much closer to this. It's okay to fail as long as you get back up. Culture. I think that's the big step we took in Europe, and I'm more close. Definitely in Berlin, definitely in some of the hotspots in Europe for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That was less the case in our time. It was it was a risky step to do that in 25 years ago.
Yeah, got it. Okay, makes sense. I put a post on LinkedIn recently, and it was Lewis Hamilton's LinkedIn profile, and he had Formula One driver, F1 driver, world champion, and then entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so the narrative that I had around it was that Lewis Hamilton wants to be you because entrepreneurship is now, it's very, very sexy, right? As a career, as a vocation of choice. It's the number one vocation of choice, first equal with influencer for United States high school age kids, which is kind of crazy. And you've been around entrepreneurs for years and years, and we'll talk about EO a little bit later as well. So you've mentored, shepherded, guided the entire organization of EO. Do you think that entrepreneurship is for only a small proportion of people, or can anyone make themselves a successful entrepreneur, or something different?
I think I mean, there is no hard barrier for anybody to be an entrepreneur and be a good entrepreneur. I do think, however, that there are people who really don't have the risk attitude to be a happy entrepreneur. And I've seen people in corporates that talked about entrepreneurship for a very long time, but not willing to really, walk the walk and step out. And, it's golden handcuffs. You have a very smooth, comfortable life. And that's fine, right? People are different, and that's fine. I think you need this, in many ways as an entrepreneur, you go all in. And your business life is more closely tied to your personal life as an entrepreneur. For certainly a while, it's always on. There's no off button as an entrepreneur for quite a long time at least. So that takes a certain personality, the ability, the grit, tenacity, and I think for me it was actually the first few years, not few months, the first few years, at least about 2 years. It was really difficult to learn how to deal with this increased volatility. What I call it, the highs are higher and the lows are a lot lower as an entrepreneur. Before in my professional service career, I had some successful things and less successful things, but all relatively muted. But, winning a large client is an incredibly ecstatic experience. And then really, having a diss or not reaching people can really get you into a low mood. And so the lows are tough and the highs are super, super exhilarating. So that volatility, I definitely needed to get used to.
Resilience and grit are things that you and I both talk and think about quite a lot. And they have proven through research now that the number one determinant of success is your resilience, which is
absolutely, yes. From
my experience, and I'm curious about yours, my experience is that the critical thing that builds resilience is hardship.
Yes.
Either real or either an inflicted hardship or chosen hardship.
Yeah.
And so what things have you seen people do? What practices or what experiences have you seen people go through that help them build resilience?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, just a quick thing that came to mind. There's a Japanese. I used to live in Japan for a while and I've done quite a bit of business there. There's a Japanese proverb, Nanaoki Yakarori, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Which is such a beautiful framing for what entrepreneurship is all about, right? I don't know anybody who had a straight line to success, right? We all had, different degrees and numbers of failures before. And it's about getting up again, kind of shake off the dust and keep going. So I think one thing that I've seen in many of very successful entrepreneurs is people who have had hardship early in their lives, childhood, also, just difficult upbringing that kind of steeled them for this perseverance and this grit to really show the world and to go. A second one is sports. People who have done sports and learned a bit. It's proven. If you look at all these great sports, Tiger Woods or Roger Federer, or take Lewis Hamilton, whoever it take, talent is overrated. That's what we rave about, and the hero stories. But what they all show, they worked harder than anybody else in their profession. Right? They put in more sweat, they put in more effort, and that's. I think armed service can be something. Helped me, for example, a lot. But I think it's really, I think it's also a muscle that can be trained, right? This resilience, this getting up, music, of course, if you play an instrument at a high level, it takes a lot of determination and discipline over very long periods of time. I think anywhere where you practice to strive for excellence, I think is a great practice ground to develop this tenacity.
Yeah, love it. When I'm interviewing people, be they leaders or individual contributors, my core focus in that first kind of, hour discussion, which determines whether or not they come back for a much deeper conversation, is do I align with this person sufficiently around values? And that comes about through discourse. But then once I've got close to them and I tell them a story about some hardship that I've experienced, and I've got a bunch of it, so it depends on the person and the context. But then I look to them for them to share with me an experience of hardship that they've had in their life. And honestly, Marc, if they can't articulate something that's been really, really difficult for them in their life, I really go cold on that person, because I want to know that they've been smacked down. I want to know, because then they know, because they've gotten back up again. Because you don't want to have that person where they've come into the environment and they've had cushy, straight up to the right, high school captain, ducks, brightest person in the school, these sorts of things, the big dog in the small yard, and they get into the big yard all of a sudden and they get smacked down and they don't get back up again because it's been easy up until that point. So yeah, that's a personal view of mine. Do you have a view on that, by the way?
I think that's, for me, that really relates very strongly to EO, and one of the reasons why I think we were able to connect so quickly, so deeply within EO, even if we don't know each other. And I think it's really the willingness to share without the mask, without this knight in shining armor kind of behavior that we often need to demonstrate to the outside world as entrepreneurs, that we are in control, that things go well. But then we dare to shed that and say, well, look, not everything's great. It looks like I'm on top of the world, but actually this part of my life is not good. And I think that makes us, relate and trust, and that builds this immediate connection, bond, to trust each other and have a much different conversation.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. So let's talk about the exits of Totemo. So the financial exits of Totemo. There's been there was at least two. The one that really piqued my interest when I was digging through the research was you were nearly about to sell to a company that turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. So tell us about that.
That's one of the craziest stories. So we entertained two earlier serious discussions of selling the company. And that's the second one, so in the middle between the first and the last one. And we were approached by a US East Coast based company in adjacent field in cybersecurity as well. Private equity backed. We started serious discussions with them, many phone calls, video calls. They did due diligence on us, and we said to us that the deal structure entailed an equity portion of their company. They said, well, we also want to do at least a bit of due diligence, getting to know about you as well. They said, absolutely fine. And we hired a US firm to conduct due diligence to the tune of, not millions, but a few 100,000, and not peanuts either. With all good, everything fine. I met their CEO and founder. I had a trip to the US. I think maybe it was even EO in Washington DC. I met the person for breakfast. And very, very good conversation. Everything seemed, we were very close. We had a full-fledged contract out. It was very close to signing, and then radio silence. The person didn't know. There was no response anymore, and we really had no clue what's happening. And with quite a few weeks actually, time delay, we learned that he was arrested by the FBI. It's a federal investigation, and indicted and charged with wire fraud and multiple fraud cases. So basically, the whole thing was, as you say, was a Ponzi scheme, was kind of ineffective. He had hired actors to play employees whenever there was people visiting the firm. So he really defrauded the investors. They basically invested. And literally there was no substance to the business, no real substance to talk of. There was a collaboration between he as CEO and the CFO. And he's serving prison in Rikers Island. So we really, we were so close to selling basically to vaporware, to nothing.
That's phenomenal. So the company that you hired to do the DD on them, they didn't turn any of this up?
No.
Did you wonder if they were in on the act at some stage, or that they were perhaps doing somewhere themselves?
I didn't investigate that. It's a fairly reputable firm. I doubt it. I think they just have done a fairly decent job, because obviously they also, some of their investors were professional investors. They surely did some due diligence as well. So I think they did a fairly decent job, but a job seriously with pretty significant criminal energy, hiring actors to play employees and make sure, it's pretty far-fetched. So I don't think. I think they were just they were also misguided. They just didn't pick up on it.
Wow.
And we didn't either. We were saved basically by the FBI.
Yeah, wow. So if that deal had gone through, what would that have meant for you and your co-founders?
Well, I'm not sure if we would have. Well, frankly, I don't know. There was a cash portion in that deal structure. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what the allocation was. I don't remember the deal terms. But obviously, a large part of the reward would have been kind of inexistent. And frankly, I don't know to what extent we would have possibly been exposed later to criminal, I don't know how long it would have taken us to realize what's going on. And obviously ours was a legitimate business. I don't know how that would have kind of combined with the illegitimate kind of scheme. I really, frankly, I don't know. But I think it would have been disastrous and extremely nerve-wracking and painful.
Yeah, it's a funny thing just to entertain the notion of, because it's not like buying a car and then, presenting a bad check because you've actually physically got possession of that vehicle, right? Or even a house maybe, because there's laws around, squatting and, rights of occupancy and that kind of thing. But buying a business is like, there's whilst it has it's been assigned the character and the attributes of a person, it's not, there's physical land and buildings, and there's customers, and there's money and bank accounts, all that sort of thing. So it's a crazy idea to wrap your head around, isn't it?
No, legally, typically the buyer, typically such a deal, we probably could not have achieved to have this Swiss jurisdiction, Swiss laws. It probably would have had to operate under US law, which is prohibitively expensive for us to pursue a legal action. Possibly we could have sued to kind of renege and then kind of, basically abandon the transaction and what, to really execute on that, as you say, customers and a license contract, etc. Probably would have killed us.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lucky escape. So
yeah.
Ultimately, the company was sold to a business called Kiteworks. So what was the gap between the Ponzi scheme non-exit
about
and
5 years?
Yeah, okay, right. I wondered there might have been a decent gap because probably some scar tissue and some hesitancy. So how did the Ponzi experience affect you when you went into the Kiteworks conversation?
Not so much. When we started discussion, the company was called Excellion at the time, and now is named after their main product. It's not Kiteworks. They have been private equity backed for a long time, and their initial private equity back, when they reached out to us, is a company I know. Their founder is a Wharton grad that I've met in Hong Kong. So I had an immediate kind of back channel at the key level. So that gave us a lot of confidence and trust, and we met with their CEO, who's came newly in to really get the business going, who made a tremendous impression. It's an amazing CEO. So I think I think that burnt, I think that was quickly overcome, and we knew this was a real player. This was a real opportunity and a real possibility.
Yeah.
But then the negotiations were very long-winded. We negotiated for close to a year, and maybe 9-10 months. And one thing, they had changed private equity sponsor. So they had done a secondary. So the company that I knew quite well was replaced by another one, by US-based private equity company. And we were their first acquisition. And the new sponsor basically had invested on a buy and build strategy. So it was really their game plan to not just organically grow, but also selectively purchase companies. And we realized late, and I remember I was on an EU event in Dubai at the time, was on the phone with their head of corporate development who led the transaction from their side. And suddenly it really clicked, and I said, hey, I really get it now. This whole legal difficulties we're having, they're not driven by you and Baron, by the CEO. They're really driven by your sponsor, right? They're super careful. It's their first. So basically our terms were financially very attractive, but legally extremely restrictive. So our own lawyers basically advised us against accepting the terms. And we actually did with really relatively a light mood, with good confidence, because we had built the company from scratch, right? We knew there was no skeletons in closet. We knew our kind of our own setup. So we were able and willing to agree to onerous legal terms, which were pretty nicely compensated. And they held up their part of the deal. They had the tools to be pretty nasty, on some of the reps and warranties, and none of that happened. They were absolutely fair and very, very decent. So it was really and all of the team is still in place, which is rare, right? 4 years after usually most of the people have left. They're all on board.
Hey, legend. Thanks for your ears. I really appreciate you listening to the show. Everything improves through feedback. I'd be really grateful if you could head to my website, joshcomrie.com, just click on the podcast link and fill out a 2-minute survey, which will give me the insights around the things that you're enjoying about the show and where you would like us to go more into the future. It'll take less than 2 minutes. I'd be really grateful. And you'll also receive some free resources should you share your email address with us. Thanks so much and enjoy the rest of the show. It's the third time I've heard that derivative of the story, which is that the firm that did the buying, it was their first deal, and the tentativeness and the over diligence that happens as a consequence. And an M&A idiom springs to mind, which you'll be very familiar with, which is that you set the price, I'll set the terms. And you've indicated that there. It was a great price, but there was some onerous terms. So
correct.
How did you? So you've got this good deal, but you're like, some of these terms are pretty intense, and your lawyers said, maybe not. Was it just trust in the deal, trust in the people that enabled you to get across the line with it, or did you have some kind of uncertainty and some apprehension even after the deal was done?
No, I think we established a very good trust level with the people operationally leading the business, particularly the CEO and the head of leading the M&A head, if you're on corporate development head, who led the transaction and is leading quite a few of the subsequent transactions. And then later also with the whole executive team, right? With the business unit heads, with the CFO. And so I think there was trust at the personal level. And then also, as I said, also on our side, we said, okay, yes, we guarantee a lot, but we also know exactly what we guarantee, because we know our accounting, there's just no single, shady thing there. There's just nothing there that they could eventually discover that they don't know yet. So we felt, yes, maybe it's kind of above average onerous and market, above market onerous. But we can, with good conscience, agree to that.
Yeah. Now, I think this was your deal that you ended up with covering multiple jurisdictions, and you ended up going with UK law. Is that right? So you ended up
that was like actually on what I touched upon before. We basically said that maybe that was part of the part of thinking of the Ponzi scheme FBI case. We were very strong as no US law. If there is anything, it's impossible for us to do anything legally in the United States on the US jurisdiction with the US court of law. And they said, and no way Switzerland, right? It's too far for us. It's too different, our legal system. So we agreed on UK law, which made it super expensive for both of us, right? So basically we had US lawyers, we had Swiss lawyers and UK lawyers working together. So it's not $1 billion deal. But I think as a percentage, I think our combined legal bill was pretty outstanding. It made it an expensive deal, but it seemed, and again, in hindsight, probably, given how we operate now, it could have been easily Switzerland or the US, and all of us would have been fine. But that high level, we haven't worked together for 5 or 4 years at the time yet. So it probably was a good call, but it was an expensive call.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's not such a stupid thing, because picking a jurisdiction outside of both homes' jurisdiction raises the hurdles to do anything silly legally a lot, because it's very inconvenient for both parties. So that part is actually maybe not a stupid thing altogether.
Yeah, interesting. That's a really interesting piece of insight. So it was around about that time, just after you'd done the deal, that we first met, which was through Entrepreneurs Organization. And so we're both kind of long-term stalwarts, very passionate about the organization. But tell me about, because you were sitting in the global chair role, which for those that don't know, there's kind of two sides to EO. There's the employed folk. They sit in Virginia, in DC in Virginia, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, Alexandria, Virginia, correct.
Okay. And they run the nuts and bolts of the organization, and they're paid to be there. And then there's the volunteer side of the organization, which is people that move up through voluntary ranks and take on this thing in addition to their job, their business. And they have this responsibility for a reasonably chunky organization. And you chaired the board of directors that had the CEO essentially reporting to them. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
It's a big job. So what made you take that job on?
A bit like the board work. It's not that I joined EO in 2008 and said one day I want to be serve on the global board. I didn't, when I joined, I didn't even know there was a global board. It's all very, very detached. I'll just join a chapter and do my job there and enjoy the events and learn. It was really, again, step by step. One big step came. I had served in certain roles on my chapter board. So we're EO Resort. It's about 20,000 members in about 70 countries, organized in what we call local chapters. We have about a bit more than 200 chapters worldwide. And I served in some roles on my chapter board. And then I took a small break. Then I served in a small global role in a committee, in a certain function. And at some point, the then global chair, people from the Philippines, we got to know each other. And she took an interest in my background, what I've done. And she basically called me and says, well, there's a role that has not really worked the last few years. It's a global role. Would you be willing to consider that? And I discussed it, and finally I accepted, and I was selected. So that was my first global leadership role, leading the global committees that deals with what we call strategic alliances, sponsorships and partnerships. And so that was and then kind of one thing led to the after doing that job, possibly, doing some things decently okay. Some people called me that served my boards and says, Mark, maybe you consider stepping up to applying to join the global board. And initially my reaction was, hell no. There was a F word in there as well. And I thought, no way, right? And then I started really considering it, and I even brought it into my forum, my small group of confidence, where we share big issues that concern us. And that really helped me. And I said, well, okay, I apply. I don't think I'll get elected anyway, but I throw my head in the ring. If I get a truly huge learning experience, I'm very much driven by learning. Yes, it's also a big time commitment, but I think it's possible. And then same with the chair role, there was you're a small group that joined in the same year, and we had a quite detailed discussion, and we decided that I would step up and apply to be nominated as global chair. So it was really step by step, and the 18 months it's kind of chair elect, and then the 1 year chair role. So for 18 months, it essentially is a full-time job. It's a non-paid full-time job. So a big sacrifice in many ways, also from the family point of view, especially from the family point of view. But the impact and the learning is priceless.
Yeah. What were some of the 2 or 3 of the absolutely key things that you took away from giving up a year of your life to lead a team of leaders in a voluntary capacity? What was the biggest growth for you?
So in terms of personal learning, I would say 2 things. One is on the communication side. I knew I would have to speak a lot, right, on stage. Sometimes audiences of maybe just 100 people, but then up to several hundred, up to, in the case of GLC, about 2,000 people. And I didn't think of myself as being a great storyteller, great public speaker. So I invested a lot of time in improving as a public speaker. And so several things happened. For one is I started to enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it. I do the job, but I don't do the job to be on stage. Quite on the contrary, I do it in spite of that, right? But by having more confidence and possibly becoming a bit better at it, I also started to enjoy it, which of course creates a virtuous circle, right, of improvement. And the most surprising benefit of all this effort into getting better at public speaking was, I think, that I noticed that I also got better at being a communicator in a small setting, in a one-on-one setting or a small group, where I always felt quite comfortable, but that some of the tools I learned at the stage level, I could deploy also in a small setting that I hadn't at my tool set, and that are extremely important and effective. So a very unexpected benefit in learning in an area that seemed much more relevant for me happened almost kind of unexpectedly and surprisingly. So that's one element. The second one is conflict. I kind of had or tend to have a bit of a bipolar approach to conflict. I shy away from conflict for quite a while, and then kind of drastically go into real fight when it's too much, with little in between, which is not good, right? Is not good. So again, no, I don't consider it a strength of mine, but I got better at for one thing, the awareness of it, and second of having this increased awareness of being able to be more assertive earlier, but in a more moderate way, which is a much healthier way if I'm in disagreement with something, to navigate conflict and kind of holding back or them to go in very, very, very forcefully.
I see this a lot, especially around board tables, as people grapple with that. I call it the magic bit in the middle, which is at one end you've got harmony, which is not very helpful because we're all very nice to each other. And at the other end, we've got conflict, which is also not very helpful because of our fight or flight mechanisms kind of aroused, and we go to the shout or hide kind of place. But there's this tension in the middle. So you said that you learned how to get into those conversations more easily. What kind of tools, what kind of techniques did you use to be able to bring that assertiveness without it descending to conflict?
I think the first and very fundamental step is this awareness, this raised awareness of my own tendency and this own behavior, and with that the internal questioning. Okay, is this still in a territory where it's okay to hold back and just let go, or is this actually something that starts to really get close to me and is something and kind of then say, okay, so this means I need to engage. And then with engaging, one thing I learned very early, which is, I think, a very powerful thing, and I think in your particular, but I think applicable in business as a founder, CEO, or as possibly as a chairman in a company, is to be very aware. One person told me, Mark, as global chair, your voice carries more weight, and it possibly carries more weight than you think it does. So I kept that very strongly in mind when talking to people. You mentioned that we have member leaders and we have staff leaders, and sometimes staff people have almost a fearful relationship to the senior member leaders, which is not healthy. So I was very conscious of that. So I tried to establish a very personal dialogue when I raised something and says, hey, look, so I was just very conscious and cognizant of that possible perception that I might be seen as a kind of at a crazy exalted level as global chairman. I just say, look, it's just a concern I have, which I would like to share. What is your view? And try to be as human as possible by making such a point.
Mm. It's really like the first bit there is a self-awareness piece, right?
Yes.
It's knowledge of the self, what's going on internally, how you're reacting or responding to something, but then also how you show up in conversation and dialogue for and with another person. That's like at the core of self-awareness. And so it's really interesting that because I think about voluntary leadership as being at the pinnacle of leadership experience, because you have no power over, right? You don't have a paycheck over that person, and all you have really at the end of the day is the ability to influence this person in a way that inspire them to take action, influence them to sacrifice in other parts of their life to come along with this vision. And so, it's a wonderful mechanism, but it can be quite fraught, right? It's quite difficult because people bring emotions and passion, all that sort of stuff to it. Yeah. So it's really interesting that self-awareness was one of the greatest things that you took away from it.
Yeah.
How has that experience, sorry, you were going to say something?
No, there's actually one more element. In the time, and I served on the global board, I also worked with a personal coach. And one thing that also relates to self-awareness is in work with her, I learned to be much more aware of what my big internal triggers are. One of them, a very important one, being kind of unfairly treated, either myself or my loved ones or my close environment, which is an area where I typically then tend to react strongly. I'm quite, private and quite discreet. I'm quite well-tempered, but being unfairly treated can trigger. And so I learned, and again, to be more aware of it, but also some tactics to what we call, to create an amygdala hijack, to make sure that there's not this knee-jerk reaction and actually need able to pause and kind of hijack that immediate connection and pause and then really reflect on how to react.
It's funny, we're sitting here talking about communication tools, and these are the things that you learn about when you have couples therapy, right? These are the things that you hope that your kids might learn about when they're learning about these things at school. It all comes back down to actual core, basic, fundamental human kind of interaction and our ability to understand what's going on in here. And the amygdala, which is the lizard brain, I think is what they refer to the amygdala, yes. Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. It's the most ancient part of our brain, and it's that fight or flight thing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
yes.
It's a really big role. You gave up a year of your life to do it. You had some immense growth as an experience of it. Would you do it again?
Yes. It's funny. A while back, I was doing so after I finished with the role, I had meetings with EO in the Netherlands. And their lead chapter manager, a very large chapter, with several staff that helped the chapter. And she was sitting next to me after a function and says, "Are you happy that it's over?" And I says, "Yes." And she was quite shocked. And so you were read it. You didn't like it. And says, "No. I'm happy I did it, but I'm also happy it's over." Right. So yes, I think on balance, yes, it was tough, especially last few months were especially tough on the family. But the learning and the impact and reward, I had really, innumerable highlights and real wow moments, that and the impact we did and the personal learnings. I had one highlight was the one board meeting was during my kids' ski break. So instead of so my wife didn't grow up in Switzerland and didn't ski from childhood, so she wouldn't go ski by herself with the kids. So the whole family went to Japan, and Japan kind of rolled up the red carpet. Then my family was able to experience a few really once in a lifetime events in Japan, attending a sumo practice. Right, you cannot book that. A tea ceremony with the Grand Tea Master. Just very, very unique things. So there was a small payback, a small highlights also for the family as a small reward.
Right. So move on and talk about governance and about boards and the capacity of what you're doing now and the book. Was the book already in the works before you had the EO role, or did you begin it afterwards?
No. So as I said, I've had this fascination, and about 8 years ago, I started to really be very intentional about observing boardrooms and writing down notes. But not with the grand plan, with the big thing. Okay, one day I'm going to write something. So when my board role stopped, I knew that given that it was full time, and then it stopped kind of overnight from June 30th to July 1st. It's like. You're on and then you're off completely. And I quite intentionally did not plan for the first few months. So for a few months, I had quite an empty agenda. And I really took the time, there was summer break with the family, and then just took really a few months to think, okay, what should be my key focus points? And out of that came really this dedication to write everything down and write this book and plan for that and set aside time to diligently write and research and think about this topic.
And so from that came the notion of the book that's in me. And so for me, for example, my book is, I should have brought a copy in with it, and I've got one physical printed version of it, and I had a soft launch in 2 weeks from today. And so I had a bucket list.
I read that excerpt quite early. So
yeah, great. Thank you. On LinkedIn.
Yes.
I actually got told off because Tina put it into the EO New Zealand community group chat because it's a book launch. So it's tickets because you get a copy of the book and there's cocktails and champagne and blah, blah, blah. So it was just deemed as solicitation, and I got told off and it done for the EO group. But anyway, that's another conversation. So I had a bucket list item for me, which was to write a book, and it's been on there for 25 years, maybe even longer than that, actually. And for me, I was actually not a great writer. In fact, English was my worst subject throughout high school, and I really developed an interest in it when I started my first business. And one of my team 20 years ago said to me, hey, there's this thing called blogging. It's just kind of kicking around. I'm like, what is it? And she goes, people write and they put articles on the internet. I'm like, why do they do that? And she goes, well, people read it and it's good for your brand. And so I started to write, and it turns out that I quite enjoyed the notion of writing, the connection between brain and hands and forming ideas in a way that you can get a logical sequence of things, get a good argument together. But I didn't know ultimately what I was going to write this book about. And so for you, the reflections, the journaling, the observations that you'd had, was it like this aha moment? I've got to write about boards and how to make a board function effectively, or was it just kind of organic and it just kind of came about?
It really compounded over time, and also the EO time, I think, contributed quite a lot, because I mean the EO board work, yes, it's different. It's not a business; it's a not-for-profit organization. At the same time, it's a very complex organization. I said it's 20,000 members. It's about 150 paid global staff. If you aggregate all the chapters and the regions, it's a multi-billion-dollar business. And there's few, if you think of it, there's not many global companies that are active in 70 plus markets, right? There's no bank that operates in 70 markets. There's, some fast-moving consumer goods, the Nestle's and the Unilevers perhaps. But outside of that, in real having a physical presence and local operations, not too many. So it's truly a complex organization. So that board work, while yes, not a business, but not for profit, is truly complex and demanding. So I think that contributed again a lot to this notion. Okay, what goes well? What does it take for a board to really operate well? Because that's all I thought about for these 3.5 years. Kind of what does it take for our global board to be impactful, to really contribute to the betterment of the organization? What do I need to do? What can we do to leave the organization in a better place than we started our board service? And that coupled with so many experiences, and in that time, I met with about 70 chapter boards in person. So I met with so many entrepreneurs in so many different jurisdictions and so many different businesses. And one thing that came up so often is this trust of their own board. There's so many who don't have a board in their companies because they hear all these horror stories of bad boards. Then there's so many of us that, have a board, but they really consider it a nuisance, a necessity. There's very few that actually talk positively about their own boards of directors. And most, you can shape it, right? We're typically with the founders, we're the family business owners. We can, to a large extent, we can shape our board, and still it seems not to work in most of the time. And that's puzzling. That cannot be true. There must be a better way, because most of us have a size of business depending on the jurisdiction, the legal thing. We have to have a board. So if we have it anyway, why not use it? Why not make sure to do it well? Why keep it as a drain? So that was really the driver to say, okay, let's summarize everything that I've learned that hopefully takes a board from necessity to real value.
Great. I love the big idea. So first up, let's talk about the problem. Why are so many boards ineffective, and why do they lack trust from their key constituents?
I think that's a very big area.
I'm sorry.
I think no, that's fine. But just maybe pinpoint a few things. I think there's some elements within the board work that are relatively easy to do well, to get right, and paradoxically, very rarely still are done very well. But they could be done quite easily. You mentioned board minutes, right? To have a decision to the board minutes, are they extensive? Do they mirror not just decisions, but also discussions and things are rich? Or they can be just more decision protocols that are very short. That's easy. Decisions, stick to it, have quick board minutes quickly after the meeting. A small detail on board minutes. There's a habit in board meetings to have the board minutes shared, and then they're actually approved in the next board meeting, in person in the next board meeting. I think it's quite silly. I rather do that virtually, send them very soon, and have the board, while it's fresh, really approve them. So you save some time in the board meeting. It's done much closer to where the thing happened. So a small little detail. More importantly, and even more challenging, the board pack, right? The information you receive before the board meeting. Again, that shouldn't be rocket science, but I've seen so many suboptimal board packs in my life. I have received board packs of 160 PowerPoint pages, sometimes very shortly before the board meeting. That's not a good preparation. You need to boil it down to the essence, to the key questions that you want to discuss. You need to have a board agenda that clearly delineates, is that a topic for information? Is that a topic for ideation? Is that a topic for decision? Because you want to facilitate the discussion differently. So there's a simple things, and there are oftentimes even those that would be quite easy, if you will, are not done well. Now, the topics you mentioned, this boardroom dynamics, establishing trust in the boardroom, establishing psychological safety, keep our egos in check. These are really difficult things, right? These are really challenging things. And Simon Sinek coined this phrase of the infinite game, right? Establishing trust is not a one-time thing. Establishing psychological safety is not a one-time thing. It's a never-ending work. It needs to be reinforced, reiterated, reworked. There will be setbacks every single time. And what makes it even more difficult in a board setting is the infrequency of operations, right? It's not a team that meets every day. Depending on the setup, it might be quarterly, it might be monthly. Rarely is it more than that, right? And for most board members, their board role is not their priority role either. If you have a founder CEO also in the board, his first and foremost role is founder CEO, right? Is CEO running the business operationally. the investor, maybe a VC or a private equity investor who sits on the board of the company on behalf of the investment, if you want, his or her primary role is general partner in that fund, right? Yeah. It's not that board member. So it's kind of a switch on, switch off, secondary or tertiary app. So all that together needs to really form this team strongly and establish trust, much more difficult than a team that has much more frequent operations and operates kind of in a primary role all the time.
Trust, we've mentioned on 3, maybe 4 occasions now, and yes, we've got this proximity and primacy thing. It's not the primary thing for most people; it's a secondary or a tertiary thing for most people. And so, establishing trust in the workplace, there's twee activities such as going back to trust falls. Close your eyes and fall back, and that was a big thing back in the 90s and noughties. That was a thing. And then Brene Brown came along and she told us that vulnerability was the way forward, which I do absolutely believe in. But you need to train people in vulnerability because when it's done wrong, it comes across as being a bit of a sob story, boohoo, poor me kind of thing. And I've seen that being done before. So what are some methods that you have seen work around building trust in a board forum?
So I think one thing, maybe it sounds very cliche or a bit trivial, nevertheless, is to really build time for developing personal connections. It's really not sufficient to just meet for the business part. It's important to build in personal time, and ideally, possibly with a bit of structure even. So yes, it can be a dinner. Maybe it's save the board meeting in the morning to meet in the private room, the dinner the evening before, and get to know each other. Also connect at the personal level, because that's trust. If you break down trust, there's the competency side, and then there's the character side. It's a framework from Stephen Covey. And I think it's important in the boardroom, we have ample time to demonstrate and work on our competency-based trust, but very little time to work on our on get to know each other from a character point of view, from a personality point of view, integrity and values. And that happens through personal discussions and connections. So I think it's really important. In one of my interviews with Rolf, the founder of Trivago, he mentioned that for him, the most important aspect of his board meetings is the barbecue at his house. It's not the boardroom part, but the casual part of having really ample time, just sitting around a barbecue, having discussions, and I think that really hits the nail on the head. To amplify that, a little anecdote. A while ago, I joined a medtech company, Berlin-based, right along their successful A round. So the board reconstituted. Some early stage investors left the board. Some of the new lead investors from the A round joined the board, and we had a kickoff meeting in Berlin, a strategy offsite meeting, and that offsite went wrong very early on, kind of went off track very early on. What happened is the investors felt that the founders were pushing the company in a different direction than the investors thought they had invested in. So distrust started to rise, question marks, anxiety, tension. And we managed to turn it around. We managed to save the day. We managed to realign and get on the same page. But what really enabled us to do that was the evening before. And the evening before, we met for dinner with the new team. And during that dinner, we met in a private room in a small, cozy restaurant in Berlin. And during that dinner, I unpacked a game of little cards that we sometimes use you actually use the Neo set of cards. And on these cards are what we call icebreaker questions. How would your mom describe you? Or, what are 3 traits about yourself that you really like? There's silly questions like that. And I introduced that game. And initially it was met with a lot of resistance and skepticism, kind of, seemed very esoteric and seasoned these investors, and, what's this all about? And after the first round, it started to loosen up and people started to enjoy it. And we played a few rounds. And by doing that, we each, in a guided, in a structured way, were able to, share some personal aspects of our lives, shared some things that we are somewhat vulnerable about. And that actually built that trust that enabled us next day to really save this huge tension that built up and bring it back. I'm nobody knows for sure, but I'm very convinced had we not invested the time in trust giving before, this could have been catastrophic. This could have risked the company. So trust is something, I would say trust, I treat it like a bank account. I pay into the trust account, but I need to pay in constantly, and I especially need to pay in good times. Because if I don't have enough reserves, when the shit hits the fan, excuse my French, then we're in dire straits, then we're in deep trouble. That's why I need them. But I cannot augment at the time of crisis. I need to have built the trust reserves beforehand because I need to draw upon them in a crisis situation.
Yeah, I get it. I'll paraphrase Plato here. You learn more from an hour of play with a person than you do from 1,000 hours of work. I'm paraphrasing, and essentially what you did there was to go, let's play a bit of a game, let's answer some questions, and let's build that trust. And so again, we're back to human dynamics. To know me is to see me, but to be, you need to be willing to be seen, to be known, right? And so you've got to create that environment for that to all work. Bill, I forget his surname, the $1 Trillion Coach book.
Yeah.
So he's the chair of Apple and a variety of other businesses over time.
Bill Campbell, right?
Campbell,
I think. Yes,
I think that's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So he would actually build in to the agenda. The first 30 minutes was catch-up time. And it was semi-structured, not how was the weekend, but it's like, so your kid's been unwell lately, how are you coping with that? Are you dealing with it okay? Have you got some support people around you? Proper, meaningful kind of catch-ups. And it's just getting back to the humanity of it all. It's just back to that core kind of thing again.
Yeah. So, but many boards will not be ready for that. They think that's esoteric. It's a waste of time. Let's get back to business. But I totally agree with you. I think it's time extremely well invested.
Yeah, I hear you. So if you walk into a boardroom, what are like a couple of 3 signs for you that things are either going like it's a really high functioning board? And then I'll ask you the reverse of that question. What are 2 or 3 signs of it? It's a dysfunctional board. So let's start with the high functioning.
I think there will be a bit mirror. They might be mirroring a bit, right?
Yes.
So I think a very positive sign is this clarity, kind of clarity of role, and also in the short term, kind of purpose of the meeting. So clarity of role. There's something called a board mandate. Right, kind of what is truly there's various versions. In some cases, a board is seen more as control. Sometimes outside investors, and it's more kind of reporting and control. Are we on track? Are we not on track? Things. There's always, of course, there's the legal side to it, right? Depending on legal, there's some non-negotiable elements of a board might have in terms of legal obligations, but we leave that aside. But the board can also have a bit more a creative or a shaping role. I like to reduce it to what I call support and challenge, right? It's my role to challenge with good intent in a good way, but it's also to support, right? And I think it's very noticeable if it's that, or it's more a top-handed supervision, control only thing. So the board mandate really needs to define that the clarity, what's the role of the board, and that includes a clear delineation of the responsibility of the board versus the CEO and her or his. And I think the crucial point there is clarity on hiring decisions and talent decisions. The only thing that is utterly clear is the CEO role itself, right? So the devil's in the detail, and to have a high level of clarity of how the executive team and the board collaborate and who plays which role is very important And the last point, I think that's a tricky one to pick up on, but a very crucial one is this notion of psychological safety. Is the board really in position where people dare to ask questions, where people dare to contradict, where people dare to change something challenging? That's really true. I think that is a sign of a strong, highly functional board when you have that psychological safety in the boardroom.
Mm-hmm. I can see why you've chosen this as your subject to write on. You're clearly very knowledgeable and obviously passionate about it as well. The thing that I'd overlay
definitely
with
passionate.
Definitely passionate. So the thing that I'd overlay with this as well is that I think and talk quite a lot about age and stage of the business, and then making sure that whatever you've assembled from a board standpoint is fit for purpose. And so it's very easy to either over or undercook what you need to have, or make a heavy governance board when what you actually really need is an advisory or like a, decision challenging or a coaching kind of, environment set up. And so, you've got all these concepts and ideas. You've got all these artifacts that need to be created. You've got some habits and behaviors. Then you've got to consider where the company's at, where it's trying to go. And then you go, oh shit, this is hard. It's actually
Yes.
So when does the book come out?
Negotiating with different publishers. The aim is definitely next year. At the moment, I cannot be more precise because some had a little longer process and some a bit a more speedy process. But definitely next year. I have a private edition effort going on, like you, to have a few prints early to have something in hand. But the real publishing date will be next year, 2026.
I've relied upon quite historic texts myself when I've gone looking for information. The fish rots from the head is one that springs to mind. Boards that lead is another that springs to mind. But honestly, the space is actually, it's not that current and it's not that good for texts that are out there. So I can't wait to read your work.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, in my perception, there's a lot of literature on governance. It's a topic, there's many business schools that make a good business with the executive education on board trainings and effective boards and all these things. But they're very strongly focusing on the more formal elements, on the governance elements. Whereas I think my approach really focuses much more on boardroom dynamics, on what does it take, what's really necessary in terms of functionalities, conversation, communication, interaction, which I think seems to be not the field very well researched and discussed.
Yeah. And I suspect that your book's probably going to be laden with kind of real life stories, sanitizing them. Yeah, great. Excellent.
Yes, there's a lot of anecdotes, a lot of personal experiences. I did a lot of interviews with colleagues, both, founders, family business owners, investors, the whole thing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love it. I can't wait to read it. So we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the company. We've talked about the Ponzi scheme, near acquisition. We've talked a lot about boards and governance, about EO. Is there any stone that we haven't turned over, Marc? Anything else that you wanted to touch on?
Well, I think one thing that came to mind when we had this bridge between EO and boards and our businesses, and I think one thing that also I think is very important in EO, leading in EO. We always talk about servant leadership and leading by influence because it's very it's completely unhierarchical, and it has to be because we're all entrepreneurs, and one reason why we're entrepreneurs is because we don't like to be told what to do. So if I'm chapter president or board chair, I cannot just tell you what to do. It will not work, right? You will go, F you, like who are you to tell me what I need to do, right? So our leadership style needs to be much more by influence, by leading by example, by motivating you, by convincing you, by, labeling out the case and coming to the conclusion together. And I think that practice is super powerful because I think our real world, the business world, our companies move much closer to that servant leadership model, that the old kind of more hierarchical way of leading goes out of fashion, right? And it's a bit different by geography. It's probably in the Western world. It's a bit more advanced than maybe in some other markets. In some areas like software technology, it's probably more than in construction or hospitality. But the trend is towards the servant leadership for employees to also want to think and be told what the goal is, but then find their own way. So I think that is a very important element. And I think that's, again, the parallel to the boardroom. I think in the boardroom, I always lead that way because I'm not running the business. The CEO and her team is running the business. So I also need to support the CEO. And again, I need to challenge the CEO to get to their decisions. So I don't lead the hard way, tell anything or him what to do, but I try to lead by influence in this servant leadership. And I think board services is a good term. It's really serving. And I need to put my own individual kind of interests behind the interests of the business as a whole. And I think that's a nice analogy for also being an effective board member.
Mm. How would you define servant leadership? What does it mean to you?
I think it's really this keeping my ego in check and really kind of align my actions with sounds very philosophical, the greater good, the greater aim of the context we collaborate on. And support that and again in a non-directional but in a motivational, encouraging, empowering type of way.
Yeah, love it. I would add to that, bringing that slightly woo-woo terminology in there, lead with love. So have love for the people that are doing the work, and do as much as you can to give people what they need, more, not necessarily always what they want. So those would be the things that
which includes tough love, right? Exactly. It includes tough love, the challenging part as well, but again, coming from a good place. Yes, yeah, absolutely,
totally. Marc, what a great conversation. I have a standard parting question, and it's the alternate universe career question. So there's another Marc Stöckli. He lives in a parallel universe, and he's found a deeply, deeply satisfying career. It wasn't as an entrepreneur turned author, board advisor, and chair. It's not that career, but it's a different career altogether. What is that career that would have made this Marc Stöckli very, very satisfied?
There's actually two. One, childhood and still appeals to me is Ferrari Formula One driver.
You love it.
And later that actually morphed, I guess there's this déformation professionnelle, we call in French, kind of this, my life choices affects this. It morphed into team manager of Scuderia Ferrari of the Formula One team. So that's one. The second one, I grew quite interested in hospitality. We have an amazing hospitality school in Switzerland, in Lausanne. And I think, being in hospitality, kind of maybe as a professional manager, running a hotel, a big hotel, or maybe entrepreneurially kind of owning a hotel. I love to cook. I love good food. I love good wine. So that is also something that has always attracted. Whenever I read something about hospitality or hotels, that comes back, that could have been something that I think would have given me a lot of energy as well.
I love it. Interestingly, both of those are choices that involve pouring a lot of money into them. The hospitality profession tends to be one that people lose money from than not. And running the Formula One team, there's yes, indeed. For your wife and your kids' sakes, I'm really glad that you chose the path of entrepreneurship and investing, and it served you super well. So, Marc, people will find you on LinkedIn, obviously, Stockli. For those that are listening, Marc with a C. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking to us today. I'm very, very grateful for you to getting up first thing in the morning in Switzerland. Thank you.
Thank you. Most enjoyable. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks so much for listening to the show. Your ears are really important to me. If you haven't already, why not check out joshcomrie.com. There's a bunch of free resources on there, a downloadable chapter of my upcoming book, 2 commas, a diagnostic to help you understand where your business may be at in relation to your exit journey. And why not feel free to drop me an email with any feedback that you could have. Any way I and any of us can improve is through feedback. Thanks again for listening.